So I'm happy to be welcoming James Ewing, Jim Ewing, today to talk a little bit about farming with whatever amount of dirt you've got. We talked about small space farming. And so, Jim, I'd love it if you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in this concept, and then tell us a little bit about what we can do with whatever we got.
I sure will. There's a little bit of backstory, and you're going to have to forgive me. I'm a little hoarse today, so I either have some allergies or something else, which is the big fear of everybody these days. This was originally scheduled for April 27th as a live talk, and then something got in the way, so it got postponed, which is a good thing because in April, there's not much to show you in the garden. And it's a bad thing because we've got this strange way we interact with each other nowadays. This is the micro farm. We affectionately call it Mad Valley Micro Farm. It's about 3/4 of an acre, which is way bigger than I thought it was when I started. And down here, south is facing up because that's the direction the sun comes from, and that's the direction I worship. We've got a small orchard with about 16 trees, 18 trees, because I didn't count the almonds. We've got a vineyard with about 100 plus or minus grapes of different varieties, wine grapes, table grapes. We've got a garden, which is probably why most of you are interested, of about 1,500 square feet, where we grow vegetables, berries, strawberries, raspberries. And then we've got a grain belt where we grow things like corn and oats and wheat. And this is the first year I've gotten oats and wheat to grow in any kind of real quantity. So I might have a homemade sandwich one of these days, or homegrown sandwich. So I want to just scroll through some of these and talk in a little bit more detail about that. The one thing we've got in bulk is sunlight. And I'm going to talk specifically about that because the two things that affect gardening of any kind on Bainbridge is the lack of sunlight in general, particularly during the winter, and the lack of warmth. And so there's ways to get around all of that I will speak to. So in our orchard, which should be coming up here in a second. Okay, this is a little shot of the orchard. And as I've said we've got 18 trees. We've got a bunch of apple trees, including some old English heirlooms that I hope someday to use for cider. The overhead shot here shows a very heavily laden Fuji apple tree. And the apples have all been bagged in little footies to keep the bugs off. But the thing I want to talk to on this slide is that when you don't have a lot of area, you got to make the most of the area that you've got. And along the left side here, along the fence, where you see that wooden post, beyond the wooden post are black raspberries. And on this side of the wooden post, going for about 50 feet down off the slide, are blueberries. So you can crop smaller plants underneath larger plants without affecting the sunlight on either one. So if you've got an area where you could cram something in, take advantage of that. It seems to be working okay. I'm trying the same thing growing beans inside the vineyard, and the beans aren't as happy as the berries are. And it might just be because we have really, really, really poor soil. Excuse me. To give you an idea, this tree, which is about 5 feet tall, is 8 years old. The soil is horrible. You go down and it's hard pan, and the roots take forever to grow through it. Once they do, then everything seems to thrive. Like the tree is very healthy, but it's just growing very slowly. This is another overhead shot of the orchard, or the vineyard rather. And it's basically just a row of grapes, one after another. And we've gotten juice off of it, but we haven't again, because the soil is so poor, been able to get a lot of fruit. They're coming along. This year is much better than last year, which was much better than the year before, but it is something that requires a lot of patience. We've got the some beehives. Currently, there's only one active hive. Excuse me. The bees don't do very well on Bainbridge Island. There's a very short nectar season that culminates in June with the blackberry bloom. But there are an awful lot of wild bees, and for 2 years in a row, I've had wild bees move into a hive. So it's something that you can make a go of, but it's not by any means a guaranteed success. And of course, although they've hidden from me in this picture, it's Bainbridge Island, so we're required by law to keep chickens. So we've got about 8 chickens now that are providing us with some eggs. And as I said before, we've got a grain belt, which is about 1,300 square feet of right now corn. This picture was taken right before I harvested the oats and harvested the wheat. But once you get the plant, excuse me, once you get the planting density correct, it really produces quite a lot of grain. And I'm kind of surprised. And I've tried it both. Excuse me. I hate talking when I have a sore throat. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we're hearing you
Okay.
fine.
I've tried to do it both as a fall planted crop and as a spring planted crop, and it does just the same. So the oats particularly are pretty plants when they're growing. They fall over. So even if you're on a balcony with a container, a nice tightly packed planted tub of oats would be something you could get a bowl of oatmeal out of, and also be a visually appealing addition to your garden. And then this is the overhead of the garden area itself. In here, there's a lot of rotation. There's a lot of secondary cropping going on, so that when one finishes, you immediately plant something new. And we've got strawberries, we've got raspberries, a very, very productive almond tree, which are not supposed to grow here very well. And I'll go through all of the things because I don't have my preview anymore, but on the next slide, I'm really big on the why of people doing things. And I've got that as well, in addition to a cough. I've got that as well. And so this is basically a full-time job. And literally, if you're home, every day you're home, you're doing something with a garden this size. So why do I want to do it? Well, the first thing is, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, I really like growing things. The second thing is, well, it would be really nice to have a lot of things growing for when the earthquake comes. To which a friend of mine who's an actual farmer instead of a play farmer like me said, "You're going to die." And he's right, because if I had this entire 3/4 of an acre planted 365 days a year, or the ability to store that, that's enough for one person. That's how much food, how much area it takes to feed each one of us. So then my thought is, well, it's sort of like walking in the woods with your friends and the bear attacks, the hungry bear. And it's just like, you don't have to run faster than the bear. You just have to run faster than your friends. So it does provide a little bit of a cushion. So I don't have to have a ton of food stacked in a storage unit someplace. I'll have, 3 or 4 weeks of food in the garden that I can get to at pretty much any time of the year. that's one of the good things about Bainbridge, is that you can grow things outside all year long. You got to like kale a lot for the winter crop, but you can grow things here all the time. Potatoes, you don't have to harvest potatoes. You just go out and dig them up. So it doesn't matter. They don't rot in the ground. They're just ready. Onions dry out nicely. You just stick them in a box in a dark room and you're fine. The big reason is that since all of us pretty much, we seem to be of an age, since we were kids, the nutrition content of commercially grown food has dropped by 1/3. So things that had rich, deep flavor, which is what we've evolved to interpret nutrition as, are now 1/3 as good. Now there's a dark side to that equation, is that once you grow your own stuff and you take care of it and you fertilize it properly and you get those nutrition levels up, then you can't buy the stuff in the store very easily anymore. So then the question becomes, how do you keep the things going and how you best utilize the land that you've got? So you've all heard of subsistence farming, which is the concept that you grow everything you eat, or grow enough of one thing to be able to trade or sell to get everything you eat. So I took that and twisted it a little bit because I don't have enough room to become a subsistence farmer, and I really don't want to do that all the time, and to try to be a sufficiency farmer. So what that means is that I try to grow things that I can grow 100% of what I currently use, not what I could currently use, or not what I could use, but what I'm using now. So I grow, here's another delayed slide. Come on, you can do it. There. I grow all the asparagus we can eat in a year. You know, eat it fresh, freeze the rest. And asparagus grows so well around here, you get sick of eating asparagus. You start to look for friends and they're all sick of eating asparagus, but you can grow a lot of it.
Asparagus and zucchini are happy here, huh?
Yes. Corn, we grow all the corn we need to have for a year. And again, a lot of it's fresh, a lot of it we freeze, but then a lot of it, even if it's just sweet corn, you can use to make cornmeal. You can make cornmeal in a blender or a grain grinder, anything that you have. So you can grow your own cornbread really easily. Cucumbers, you get sick of pickles. So a couple of hills of cucumbers. So far this year, I've gotten 2 gallons of pickles off of these 2 little hills. So it's a very good area for things like that. This next slide here, potatoes. This is a year's worth of potatoes. It's about a 12 by 12 bed. And the 2 on the outside have started dying back. When I took this picture, they're now completely died back. So I'm harvesting potatoes out of those already. The one in the middle now sort of looks like the one on the right side. So in another couple of weeks, I'll be able to get potatoes out of that. And I've got 3 kinds of potatoes here, so you get a variety. Yukon Golds make great potato chips. So yeah, French fries in February. Yeah, you get spoiled. You go out there and you make some mashed potatoes or baked potato or something, and you just can't eat the stuff from the store anymore. We've got 2 rows, which should be coming up here, of raspberries. And I think I got about 3 gallons of raspberries off of these canes this year. Very, very good year for raspberries. And this is one of the crops that I fought with until it slapped enough sense into me to tell me how to make it grow. In the past, it would come up to just in between the first wire and the second wire. This year they're going nuts. They finally got the right fertilizer mix and the right amount that are making them happy. And I'm going to talk about fertilizer a little bit more later, because around here it can be problematic. Strawberries, we've got 2 little beds of strawberries. Well, and again, more strawberries than we can eat fresh, more strawberries than we can turn into jam for a year. So our friends are pretty happy when the strawberries come in. Tomatoes and tomatoes and more tomatoes. Now this last picture is inside the greenhouse, and I'll talk about the greenhouse in detail. But if you can have a space where you can start early and get things out under protection, like these tomatoes that are growing outside the greenhouse, I start them in those water-filled little plastic teepees, and you can put them out at the end of April, the very first week of May, and they do just fine. This is a variety that's a sauce tomato, which is most of what we grow. The ones in the greenhouse are an Italian sauce tomato, and they're averaging about 8 to 10 ounces. So they're really big, they're really meaty, and they're good to eat as well as turning into sauce. So if you can grow a variety that's good for multiple things, you can sort of stretch your season out that way. And from these 6, 7, 8, 9 tomato plants, it's all the tomatoes we'll eat. The last tomato we harvested last season was in January. And that's before I got the ventilation fixed up in the greenhouse to keep the humidity down, because everything was dying from the fungus, because everything gets so humid around here.
So at the beginning and end of the season, are you growing in the greenhouse, those tomatoes?
Yes, I start everything in the greenhouse, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And then once they get to be survivable size, like 4 to 6 inches, and I can plant them deep, then I'll put the ones that are going outside under these plastic water-filled teepees. The water warms up and it keeps them going. And you just leave those on until the middle of June or so, when the plants are now 18 inches tall and sticking out the top of the teepee.
But your January tomato has got you must have planted a second crop in the greenhouse. No?
Nope. No, they just keep bearing. And I've got some better pictures of the greenhouse tomatoes that I'll talk about in a little bit. The other thing we get 100% of our needs of are onions and allium in general. These are onions and shallots here. This bare space in the back was the garlic bed. And I think we got probably about 10 pounds of garlic out of that this year. And I grow hardneck garlic, softneck garlic, elephant garlic. Story about the elephant garlic. You go to TNC and you buy the elephant garlic for $2 for $5, and you break them apart and you plant them, and you save about $20 as buying seed garlic at a garden store for elephant garlic. A lot of the stuff, potatoes, as long as you get the organic stuff that hasn't been treated with an anti-germination chemical, you can just go down to the grocery store and get the stuff for $1 a pound for potatoes or something like that, and just use that as your potato start. So as I was talking before, hang on a second. This area, the bare spot where the garlic is now a winter bed that's got bok choy, Chinese cabbage, and the ubiquitous Bainbridge staple of kale growing in it, which I almost lost 100% of this year because of sparrows. Sparrows are so cute. They come to our feeders. They're very chirpy. They're friendly. They come over and see what you're doing. And then when you're done doing it, they come in and devour it. And they love seedlings. So it doesn't happen in the spring, only in the summer and fall plantings. So they've tried to take out the kale, which is almost unkillable. They've taken out 2 crops of lettuce, completely gone. They went after my winter cabbage, and they'll pull onions out just to see what they are. They don't eat them, but they just pull them out. So all of that stuff has to be protected until it's big enough not to let the sparrow get it. So, yeah, this is why you grow it. You get good stuff that you get to pick fresh, that you know how it was grown, you know that it hasn't been mistreated. There have been no, everybody's like, should I buy organic or shouldn't I buy organic? And I'm not totally on board the commercial organic bandwagon, because at commercial scale, they use square miles of single-use plastic as weed control. So they just pave a field with plastic, punch a bunch of holes in it, and grow the crops in the holes. At the end, after they've harvested everything, the plastic gets picked up. It's not recyclable. It's not reusable. It just goes to the dump. So I try to grow as much of what I can that I'm going to eat. Strawberries, berries are a big winner. I mean, we probably grew $200 worth of strawberries in those little beds that I showed you before, probably about the same in raspberries. It's possible to save a lot of money and you get much, much better stuff. So that's sort of the motivation. So if you've got space, this is the best use you could make. Even if your garden, this is 12 by 16. If your garden was 12 by 16, if you put it in a greenhouse, you'll get 10 times the amount of stuff as not having it in a greenhouse. It just, I had a little homemade plastic greenhouse made from plumbing supplies, and it didn't really work that well. But when I got a good greenhouse with proper ventilation and proper humidity control and good workable soil inside, it just produces an insane amount of food. This one, you'll see it's got 2 solar panels on the top, which I use to charge a battery, which powers fans, which take the heat out of the greenhouse and pump it into the ground when the greenhouse warms up. And then once it drops below 50 degrees at night, it pumps the cold air into the ground, warms it up, and sort of mutes the up and down temperature swings that you would get in a regular greenhouse. Big thing around here is that you want to have the whole thing glazed. Everywhere else in the country where the sun actually shines in the winter, you can get away with just having the south face glazed. Here, because the light is so diffuse, to get the most amount of light, you have to have it facing all the different directions. But it's just remarkable. So here's the first week of May. So I've got what you can see here, some little tomatoes in the middle. There's a pot with a cactus in it. There's some lemongrass. There's some basil. Here's the first week of July. And now you can see some lettuce coming up. The basil is now a foot tall. There are peppers. So basically everything along the front wall on the left side here is a tropical plant. There are Thai chili peppers, there's Southeast Asian holy basil, things that you just can't get to grow around here. So not only do you get a season extender, you basically get a climate shift. So you can grow things very well in the greenhouse that you just can't grow at all outside. And again, once you get the fertilizer dialed in, you can really move it along. So these are all Thai chilies and the holy basil. The tomato plants, are now 10 feet tall. They've all been topped, and they've got tomatoes all the way up. So the ones on the bottom here, are ripened. The ones in the middle are ripening. The ones further up are still green, and the ones at the top are tiny. So I'm going to be pulling tomatoes off of this thing for the next 3 or 4 months, not counting any new tomatoes that grow. So if you have a little amount of land and the inclination to build one of these, you'll love it. I mean, you grow even cool weather crops do better in here. Like the lettuce gets better. You get actual heads of lettuce just because of the warmth. So as some of you live in apartments and don't have room for this or room for a big garden, what do you do when you don't have any dirt? So this is what I did before I did this. And this is a sailboat I fixed up. And this shot was somewhere in the Bahamas. But up underneath that Dodger is a little herb garden. You can't really see it in this. I just know it's there and I know where to look. It wasn't much, but I was growing something that contributed to what I ate. So if I made a pizza, I had fresh basil and oregano to put on it. If I had a salad, I'd do, a little baby lettuce. It wasn't a whole meal, but I was contributing. The difference is that where I was on this boat, it was pretty much always sunny, which is not a characteristic of Bainbridge Island. So what do you do if you want to have something year round and you don't have a lot of dirt? You've got great opportunities here with a south facing balcony doing container gardening. But then in the wintertime, you got to have something else. This is what I use. It's just a little grow light. It's the size of a nursery tray. So you can fill it with seedlings. It's great for growing baby lettuce. I use it for starting all my starts. If you have it out in a garage or something, or in the greenhouse like this, you can put a little heat mat over it underneath it to help germinate things. And you can do really well with this. If you don't have an outside place to put it, you can get something like this, which are basically completely self-contained counter gardens or under table gardens in that one case. The one on the left here, my daughter has one of those, and she's growing peppers in it. Tomato, you can just grow all this stuff, and it's very efficient. It uses LED lights, and the one at the bottom actually gives you a chance to kill fish at the same time you're growing your herbs.
Very nice.
Now, if you want more than that, and if you want to go to like, okay, I'm going to grow everything of what I want to eat, I really want one of these. This is called the O Garden, and it's about the size of a large washing machine. They cost $700, but the cabinet on the bottom is where you start all your greens. There's grow lights in there. There's a water reservoir, and then as the seeds come up, you just move the containers up into this drum, which rotates around, and you can do 90 plants at a time in this thing. And it's a really good idea for indoor gardening. A lot of the problem is that this isn't organic, but you're not doing pesticides, you're not doing herbicides, you're not doing any of the sides. All you're doing is inorganic fertilizer. So it's growing in a very weak solution of basically Miracle-Gro.
And you think that you're on 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Exactly. Open the pod bay door. One thing that I completely hate is waste. So pretty much everything we eat goes back into what we're going to eat next year. The container on the left is things that the chickens will eat. The container in the middle are things that the worms will eat. And the container on the right is a little compost collector for things that nobody else is going to eat. That bucket goes into one of these drums, and you alternate between the two. And then when that gets cooked down a little bit, so meat scraps, anything that's supposedly not compostable, you can compost in just a couple of months around here. And then that goes onto the bulk compost pile. So there is method to this madness, which looks like a dump. but it turns it into this. And it's a really, I get 2 yards of compost a year. So I very rarely have to buy compost unless I'm starting a new bed and need to really bulk up the organic material. It's just gorgeous stuff. The plants love it. Fertilizer works better when you have a good organic mix in your garden, and it's just good stuff. So I encourage you to compost, even if you have an apartment, and you can just do it on a really small scale.
So in those closed containers, you can actually put meat, which you wouldn't probably put in a bin that you would let that rodents might be able to get to.
Exactly. Yeah, you just want to make sure that it's all composted before it goes outside. 2 books I really strongly recommend, and I know Growing Vegetables West of the Cascades is in the library. I'm not sure that The Intelligent Gardener is, but it should be, because it's been around for a while. These are specific to our area. The Intelligent Gardener gives you some of the science background about how you make your soil better from containers up to farm scale. And Growing Vegetables West of the Cascades talks about varieties and planting schedules and things like that are specific to the coastal environment and our Mediterranean climate. Really interesting reads, and I recommend them. And I think that might be it. That's it.
That's great. That is fascinating. So, so you said that whenever you're home, you're working in the garden.
Yeah, for at least a few hours a day. It just, you've got to take care of the chickens. If things need water, like this time of year, you're going to be putting a little water on all the time, because I haven't gotten sophisticated enough to install the web-enabled sprinkler control system to the drip irrigation, where I can say, okay, give me a gallon out of this drip emitter on this tomato plant. So you got to watch after it. So that's all I've got. So
well, that's quite a wonderful story. If you have any questions, please open up your microphone and ask them. Carolyn, you look like you might be on the verge of a question.
I wonder how much chickens contribute to your compost.
The chickens themselves don't, but their bedding does, because they're on straw bedding inside their coop.
Yeah.
So I'll clean that out every month or so. I'll throw it in, and then clean it out. So that straw composts down. So that's an awful lot of it. And then this year, my friend who's a farmer raises pigs. And when the restaurants all shut down, he couldn't get restaurant scraps anymore. So he was having everybody collect grass clippings that would extend the hog food. Well, that worked really well, because I'd have excess that he didn't need, and that going into the compost made it really hot. So now in some areas of the yard, I'll take that and just bag it anyway, even though I'm not giving it away to him. And it's heated up the compost bins quite a bit.
So that speeds up the whole process. And you were saying a little bit about fertilizer. Do you have any suggestions about what to buy?
Well, yeah. What you want to buy around here is fertilizer that's specific to your soil. So I've got really lousy soil that's very, very high in magnesium and potassium, to the point where I shouldn't add any more potassium. And if I add any more magnesium, like using a soil conditioner that's made out of dolomite instead of limestone, the excess magnesium causes all the clay materials to basically turn into these little round bricks. And it takes years for them to break down. So I made that mistake, luckily, my first year. So by now, all those clay bricks are starting to break down.
I was going to say, you spoke with an authority that made me believe that you must have learned the hard way.
The hard way. You learn everything the hard way. So that book, The Intelligent Gardener, has some resources for getting soil samples run. There are now dozens of places. I think WSU even will do soil samples for you. The thing I didn't like about going through WSU is that they're supported by Monsanto, so I don't know where all that data is going, or Bayer now, I guess that they've taken over Monsanto. So there are some private labs. I use one called Logan Labs, and it's a good thing to know because it gives you a starting point, and you can adjust things for the starting point and then just have to maintain it after that. So now I just have this general mix that I use for the garden, a different mix that I use for the trees, and a different mix that I use for the berries, which tend to like it more acid. And it's really easy to make. You just mix it up in a bucket and sprinkle it around.
I feel like one of the things that you touched on a little bit with your herb garden or savory garden in the boat was the idea that even if you're not going to grow all the food you need, your table gets a lot more interesting when you get to add bits and pieces from your garden.
It's partly that because when you're out on a sailboat, there aren't too many markets. You might hit a market once every 3 weeks or a month. So having that just, makes it more interesting, but there's also a certain satisfaction of, knowing, having a sandwich where you may not have grown the bread, but you ground the flour to make the bread. And then everything in between those two slices of bread came out of your garden.
Well, I really want to thank you for walking us through this. I learned a lot, and I think I have a couple of books on my Christmas list now.